Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to check out my video. This video is releasing quite a bit after Season 2 of Diablo 4 has already finished, but it was written when the season was still ongoing. I've decided to go ahead and edit it all together to make a feedback video anyway. Enjoy. Looking at Diablo 4 Season 2, I can pretty confidently say it's a vast improvement over Season 1. Season 1 really felt more like a preseason more than anything, and it added in only really one bigger mechanic to change up the gameplay. However, Season 2 takes a completely different approach and adds a multitude of content to help flesh out the gameplay even further. The additions this season, aside from the various balance and quality of life updates, are the vampire mechanic and the addition of 5 unique Uber bosses. I start each season with various goals in mind, and I set out to see if I can achieve them. My goals for this season were 1. To make a build of my own, 2. Engage with and experience the new system mechanic, this being the vampire system, 3. Defeat the 5 unique Uber bosses, 4. Complete the season pass, and 5. Have fun. Let's start with my build first. I wanted to see if I'm able to pull together a build capable of clearing both the season content and the newly added 5 unique bosses without using any meta guides or meta builds. I consider this a challenge, but also I think it's a very important way to gauge the accessibility of the game. If I'm spending time watching a bunch of YouTube videos and reading a bunch of guides on how to make my build and play it, then that's time I'm spending outside of playing the game in order to prep to play the game. For this season, the only video I watched was to explain the new resistance system, which I probably would have figured out on my own if I wasn't being a bit stubborn about it. For this season, I went with Barbarian. I played through Season 1 as Necromancer, so I wanted to try another class out for Season 2. I went with Whirlwind as my main damage-dealing ability, and built my entire character basically around that skill. I can say that, despite not using a meta build, although it would be interesting if I accidentally made a build similar to whatever the meta build is for Whirlwind, I was able to play through the season content and also take down the 5 unique Uber bosses. Next, let's take a look at what Season 2 in particular offers. Season 2's main mechanic, the vampire system and zones, are a huge win for character customization and overall smoothing out of the gameplay flow. The zones themselves are essentially mini hell tides that are always up, and you run around the zone fighting vampire mobs and engaging in different kinds of events. The key synergy here, however, is how the vampire zones tie into the Whisper system. Often doing the events and engaging with the vampire zone not only gives you a ton of gear and blood for the vampire powers, but also completes your Whisper bounty as well. This results in you being able to kind of double dip in terms of getting gear from vampire zones. This is highly refreshing and made the vampire zones feel extremely worthwhile to do. Speaking of that vampire blood, it's used to level your vampire abilities. The abilities are highly varied, some adding unique forms of defense, with others adding unique forms of damage, summoning a pet bat, cursing the enemies, and even some unique forms of CC as well. The ability I used the most, however, was Metamorphosis, which changes your dodge into a bat dash. This bat dash synergized with another vampiric ability, which allowed me to apply vulnerability on enemies I dodged through. As such, this mechanic alone became my main way of applying vulnerability to targets. Of course, I'm only scratching the surface here, as the abilities work in tandem with the pack system, placing packs on your gear to allow you to equip certain vampire powers. The amount of synergy with class skills seems insane. The system as a whole is really fun to engage with, and I'd certainly love to see some of these vampire powers make their way into the game permanently as unique items. On to those bosses. Now, the bosses were of great interest to me. Since Diablo 4 features a dodge mechanic, I was very interested in how Blizzard would implement Uber bosses. The Uber bosses themselves have set drop tables for each class, and as such are a way to target farm specific uniques you might need for your build. The hardest Uber boss, Uber Duriel, also is capable of dropping the extremely powerful Uber unique items, thus adding a way for players to farm those as well. Overall, I have to say the implementation of each boss is quite solid. Firstly, the way you summon the bosses was clearly very well thought out, and requests that you engage in the different pieces of in-game content in order to collect all the needed parts. Uber Var Shan can be summoned via items obtained through Whisper bounties. Grigori can be summoned via items obtained from Hell Tides. Lord Zir can be summoned via items obtained from Legion events. The Beast in the Ice can be summoned via items obtained from running Nightmare dungeons. Finally, Uber Duriel can be summoned via items obtained from defeating both Uber Varshan and Uber Grigori. So if you want to fight them all, you're going to have to engage in each piece of endgame content in Diablo 4. Let's start with the Uber Varshan fight. Uber Varshan requires capped shadow resistance and a decent amount of poison resistance. The fight focuses on pattern recognition, medium area denial, and soft DPS checks. An interesting tidbit is that with some movement speed, Varshan technically cannot ever hit you. His 2 attacks, which are actually reaches out to hit you, are not hit scan. The Nemesis Tentacle has mild tracking, while the Big Swipe has hard tracking. However, because of this, it's likely possible to actually beat him without getting hit if you're skilled enough. I think this is a pretty great design. Needless to say, I engaged Varshan when I was highly underleveled and undergeared, but because I was able to dodge everything, I eventually, and it was quite a while, I eventually was able to beat him. I think this is a great introductory fight into the Uber system. Next up is Grigori. Uber Grigori requires capped lightning resistance. The fight focuses on large area denial. As you fight, Grigori will cover various parts of the map with lightning and also occasionally summon adds. He does auto-attack quite fast, but they do not seem to do too much damage. This fight actually feels a bit easier than the Varshan fight, provided you are able to adapt to his area denial mechanics. After Grigori is Uber Lord Zir. Uber Zir requires capped fire resistance. The fight is very similar to what you will face during the seasonal story quest, but the bullet hell seems to be turned up a little bit. Similar to Grigori, this fight mostly focuses on large area denial. Zir also has a slow, telegraphed big swipe that you'll want to ensure you're dodging to move out of the way. The Beast in the Ice is next, and certainly the hardest so far. The Beast in the Ice requires capped ice resistance, and the fight focuses on pattern recognition and large area denial. Throughout the fight, the Beast in the Ice will shift through various phases, covering the screen in a multitude of different telegraphs, and you'll want to dodge appropriately. Furthermore, as this boss uses ice as its element, it can be easy to be frozen, which will snowball you, no pun intended I guess, into getting hit multiple times. Finally, we have Uber Duriel. I want to say that I first tried Uber Duriel at level 93, and I got absolutely destroyed. Getting to level 99 and getting all of my glyphs to level 15 changed the fight dramatically for me and allowed me to stand my ground and defeat him. Uber Duriel is an interesting fight as we see medium area denial combined with ad control. Uber Duriel requires capped poison resistance, and even with it capped, you aren't going to want to walk into any of the poison puddles that he summons. In fact, you really don't want to get hit by anything poison related as the damage is scaled quite high here. Uber Duriel's claw swipes will deal large amount of damage on top of poisoning you, and his claw ground slam will spawn those previously mentioned puddles. Throughout the fight, 2 adds will spawn to aid Duriel, and they have a mini bullet hell poison spit attack. I found dealing with them immediately to be the best factor, unless Duriel is low enough to just be burned down. Overall, all of these fights are a fantastic addition to the endgame of Diablo 4. It should be noted that only Duriel is level 100, so it is possible to outscale the other Uber bosses with leveling gear. Despite that, however, challenging these bosses was fun, and getting various uniques to improve my build felt extremely rewarding. I'm glad that they all have their own kind of unique mechanics, and I'd like to see more bosses like this going forward. Next, let's take a look at that Season Pass. While I know these are fairly controversial, I want to say that there is something I really want to give the Diablo 4 development team credit for. That is, I'm able to complete this Season Pass by just playing the game. There are no dailies, there are no weeklies, there are no monthlies that lock me into completing the Battle Pass at a certain pace. Battle Pass experience is gotten from the season journey, which are mini achievements to complete throughout the season, but also, as far as I can tell, you get Battle Pass experience just from killing monsters. And in Diablo 4, any content you engage with pretty much has you killing monsters. Therefore, you're always working towards completing the Season Pass. As a result, some people are able to finish the Season Pass really quickly. I personally think I finished mine around level 80. Regardless, it is refreshing not to have to worry about dailies or weeklies or monthlies at all. This system is the same as it was in Season 1, and I'd really like to see the system remain the same going forward. It feels like I'm earning rewards alongside my main gameplay. As for those rewards, well, they're all cosmetic, so taste is of great importance here. Personally, I really like the rewards, as I'm a big fan of gothic vampires and whatnot. Although I have to admit that the armor set really seems perfect for a knight or paladin type class. Yeah. In terms of criticism, I think Helltide should be reviewed in terms of if they are always active or not. As of now, it can be rather annoying if a Helltide isn't up, because this means you have no way of farming materials for Uber Grigori, which in turn means you have no way of farming materials for Uber Duriel. I think having Helltides always up, or perhaps at least reducing their cooldown, should be heavily considered. Furthermore, the overall density of Helltides, personally, I feel is still a bit too small. The resistance rework seems to be okay, and getting your resistances to cap is a big change from Season 1. However, I did notice that lightning and poison, specifically in Nightmare Dungeons, seem to have extreme damage spike capability. I did not notice this with Ice or Fire, and I'm not too sure about Shadow. Lightning Obelisk Affix, in particular, seems to be extremely dangerous in terms of doing outrageous amounts of damage. I'm not sure if the damage is scaled too high, or if the resistances aren't working properly. Finally, while I do hope Metamorphosis comes back as a unique item, the ability needs some fine-tuning. I found myself often unable to take immediate action after finishing the dodging animation, and also the dodge itself gets stuck on terrain quite easily. Overall, Season 2 is a huge turnaround from Season 1, and a huge step up for Diablo 4 as a whole. Season 2's endgame boss ladder, as they're calling it, really helps flesh out the endgame, and gives us more activities to do to get gear. The flow of each piece of endgame content funneling into the various endgame bosses is a solid and well thought out process. The vampire system was great to engage with and helped to give some extra identity to my build and provided me with a substantial power boost as well. I'm really looking forward to the next season of Diablo 4 and what the team can deliver. Alrighty, that's my review of Season 2 of Diablo 4. Thanks for taking the time to check this video out. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. Did you enjoy Season 2? Drop a comment on how you felt about Season 2. I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks.